Hi everyone! Welcome to East West Seeds Foundation's Urban Gardening Webinar Series. In this webinar series, we will teach you how you can grow your own healthy, nutritious food at home. My name is Joyce, and in today's episode, my colleague John and I will show you how to set up vermicomposting, how to produce vermicast, and how you can earn from it. What is composting? Composting is the biological process of decomposition of organic materials by microorganisms that produces compost. We can use organic materials from farm and kitchen waste for composting. You can refer on our webinar episode number 9 for details on how to make compost. Now, what is vermiculture? Vermiculture is the raising and breeding of worms for composting, animal feed, or bait. In vermiculture, the focus is on increasing the numbers of worms rather than productions of castings or vermicast. Why start vermiculture? In vermiculture, worms produce natural and sustainable source of quality fertilizers in the form of their castings, which is rich in nutrients and beneficial microorganisms, which in turn very good for the plants and soil. It helps in solid waste management, especially organic waste that can be used as food for the worms. Can also be a source of income by selling the worms and its castings, and can become a business venture. Now, let's focus on vermicomposting. Vermicomposting is the utilization of worms together with microorganisms such as bacteria and fungi to process organic materials and turn it into a beneficial soil amendment, nutrient-rich, living fertilizers for our plants. This fertilizer is called vermicast. So what's the difference between vermiculture and vermicomposting? Vermiculture focuses on maximizing the number of worms with less interest in the castings the worms produce, while vermicomposting is composting using worms with the help of microorganisms to produce vermicast as its main product. Vermicast, as a product of vermicomposting, is a worm poop or worm manure. It's a slow-release organic fertilizer that is teeming with life and helps release valuable nutrients from the soil for plant use. It also contains a complete range of macro and micronutrients which are essential for the optimum growth and development of plants. Here are the advantages of vermicomposting as compared to traditional composting. Vermicomposting results to higher nutrient content and more diversity of living microorganisms, which helps in the conversion of nutrients that the plants can easily absorb. It can compost organic materials faster, ranging from 2 to 3 months depending on how many worms you have. Lastly, the castings produced by the worms can be sold for a higher price compared to compost, so vermicomposting can also be a viable source of income. And here are some of the benefits of vermicast. It's recycled waste, turning waste into a valuable resource. It increases soil fertility. It increases the soil's water holding capacity. It improves the structure of the soil for better plant growth. Vermicast increases the microbial diversity and activity in the soil, which help to biodegrade toxic residues in the soil and increases the plant's resistance to pests and diseases. Apart from vermicast, you may be asking what or where you can use our composting worms. African night crawler or ANC can be used as bait and animal feed. It also has medicinal properties like anti-inflammatory, analgesic, antipyretic, and anticoagulant properties. In some studies, it has anti-cancer properties. Let's talk about where you can set up your vermicomposting. In this type of composting, there are simple steps to get started, and only two things require much thoughts. That is choosing the bin and finding the best worms. With those elements in place, you can set it up at home, farms, in schools, community, and even in the premise of LGU. You just have to gather some supplies, including your daily food scraps, for feeding your African nightcrawler. Having vermicomposting around can facilitate better waste management, as not everything has to be dumped. This can also be a viable source of income for households, schools, and community. Now that we know the uses, benefits, and where we can establish our vermicomposting, let's talk about the humble worms. Worms are also known as the engineers of the soil, digging burrows that allow water and air circulation in the soil. It converts organic materials into a stable and rich humus used by plants. It's also a great indicator of the health of the soil and the environment. Earthworms, together with other organisms, work together to decompose waste and turn it into a natural fertilizer for plant use. How many earthworm species are there? Worldwide, there are approximately 7,000 species of earthworms discovered and documented. Some of them are so small that you need a microscope to see them. Some can grow up to 80 centimeters or 32 inches in length. Different species of earthworms have an important role to play in our environment. And there are 3 different types of earthworms. Enesic earthworm, which lives in the soil and burrows vertically down to 60 inches of soil. They feed on soil and organic matter. Next, we have the endogic earthworms. They burrow horizontally on the first 20 inches of soil, and they feed only on soil. Last is the epigeic earthworms. They don't burrow into the soil, living only on the first 6 inches of soil. They only consume organic matter. And this type is where composting worms belong. These worms eat only dead and decomposing organic materials. Roots of healthy living plants are not harmed by the worms. There are only 7 species of worms used in vermicomposting. For temperate areas, we have red wigglers, red tigers, European nightcrawler, and red earthworms. These species can tolerate cold temperatures. Temperate species are more reddish in color. For tropical areas, we can use 3 species of worms: the blue worm, Georgian jumper, and the most popular composting worm here in the Philippines, the African nightcrawler or ANC. They can withstand hotter temperatures and are more of the grayish purple coloration. Now, let's get to know the most popular composting worms in our country, the ANC. ANC are native to the warm region of West Africa, used as vermicomposting worm in tropical and subtropical regions. They have a voracious appetite, can consume 1.5 times their body weight per day, given the optimum condition. They are mixed gray and purple coloration, can grow up to 8 inches long, large and muscular compared to other composting worms. They like to crawl and explore. They produce granulated castings. African nightcrawler and other tropical species of worms thrive in 21 to 29 degrees Celsius and can tolerate up to 32 degrees Celsius. Moisture should be maintained at 80% because worms need moisture to be able to breathe through their skins. pH level greater than 6 but less than 9 is good. Worms are sensitive to salts and ammonia. Use chicken manure with caution because it is high in ammonia. Make sure that it's fully decomposed before using chicken manure as a substrate for the worms. How do African nightcrawler reproduce? Earthworms are hermaphrodite. They have both the male and female reproductive organs, but they cannot reproduce alone. It needs other worms to reproduce. The sign of worm maturity is its clitellum, the girdle-like structure on the worm's body that produces cocoons that encloses the eggs. 24 hours after copulation or mating, they will produce cocoons with an average of 2 to 3 cocoons per week and 2 to 3 hatchlings per cocoon. The cocoon incubation period is 16 to 17 days. African nightcrawler matures from 35 to 50 days from hatching or 5 to 7 weeks and can live from 1 to 3 years depending on the environment. Let's now talk a bit more about the worm bin or where the worms will live. There are different types of worm bed or bin that can be used depending on the available materials, space, and location. Given that you have a bigger area for vermicomposting, you can build a concrete vermibeds with hollow blocks. Make sure the beds are well covered and shaded. Plastic crates and drums can also be used in setting up your indoor or outdoor bins if you have limited space at home. Pig pens and cloth can also be used as vermibeds. Or you can use banana trunks and coconut husks as a bed for your composting worms if you have the available materials. This is for a cheaper way of building vermibeds. What to feed our worms? We can use livestock manure, vegetable scraps, crop residues or farm waste, old papers and used newspapers, and corrugated cardboard or any organic material for the substrate for worms. Prepare the materials: banana trunks, vegetable scraps, and other organic materials by chopping and shredding it into smaller pieces for faster decomposition of the materials. But not all organic materials can be used as worm feed. Do not feed our worms anything sour like citrus fruits, as it may irritate their skins. Bones, meats, dairy products can be smelly and can attract pests. Do not include onions or any oil and greasy materials as they can also irritate and kill our worms. And lastly, dog and cat poop because it may carry pathogens that can be transferred to humans if you consume vegetables that are infected by these pathogens. After prepping all the materials, let's start by adding the first layer of brown materials or livestock manure. Then add the fresh or green materials alternately. Make sure to water every layer for moisture and faster decomposition of the materials. Here is an illustration of the layers of the worm bed, alternating layers of brown and green materials. Stack the substrate that higher than 2 feet to avoid anaerobic activity at the bottom of the bed. Ferment the bed for 2 to 4 weeks or until the substrate is cool enough for the worms. Place the worms gently on the bed and let them dig their way to the substrate. Keep the bed moist. Remember that worms breathe through their skin. That's why they need moisture to stay alive. Keep away ants from settling into the vermibeds. Keep the worm bed covered for protection from sunlight, heat, rain, and other factors that may affect the worms. Use GI sheets, plywood, sacks, or coconut leaves as cover. Worms are afraid of light. For them to continue doing their job, you need to keep it dark. Always check and observe your beds, but do not disturb the worms. They don't like to be moved. The characteristics of a healthy worm bed or bin are: it smells earthy. The bed should not have any bad smell. Food scraps are not visible. Contents of the bed are damp but not soggy. The worms are moist and glistening. And there are small quantities of insects like earwigs, millipedes, that help in the decomposition of the substrate. When you see that the worm bed is now made up of fine granules, it's time to harvest the vermicast. Harvesting worms and vermicast can be done in different ways. First, do not water your bed 2 weeks before harvesting to dry it partially for easy harvesting. Worms can be harvested manually or by hand picking to minimize the stress of worms during harvesting. Partial harvesting or scraping can be done if there's a thick buildup of vermicast on the top of the bed. The migration method is putting new substrate into the other side of the bed and letting the worms migrate to their new food on their own. Wait for 2 weeks and check the bed if the majority of the worms have settled in the new food, and collect all the castings on the other side. Follow the same procedure as preparing a new bed. Sieving or screening vermicast is a faster way of separating the worms and the casting, but it puts a lot of stress on the worms. If the vermicast is too moist, it may have to be air-dried for easier separation of the castings and the leftover substrate. Avoid direct sunlight when drying vermicast. Exposing organic fertilizer to the sun will lower its nitrogen content and can kill the beneficial microorganisms present in the castings. Vermicast can be stored at 30% moisture content on sacks. Store in a cool, dry place and avoid direct sunlight to protect the microorganisms. If you would like to do some large quantity vermicomposting for your farm or as a business, here's an example on how to set up a concrete worm bin. For setting up a 1 by 5 meter concrete vermibed, we need the following materials: hollow blocks, cement, sand, and steel bar for a more stable bed. Here is a one-time cost to set up a 1 meter by 5 meter concrete worm bin. At current prices, you will spend an estimated of 1,525 pesos on the worm bin materials and an estimated of 600 pesos on labor to build the worm bin. The worms are a one-time investment, because they will actually multiply. So you need not buy anymore going forward. You may even be able to sell the worms for added income. It will cost an estimated of 5,875 or less than 6,000 to set up a 1 meter by 5 meter worm bin. To summarize, you will spend 1,525 pesos for the materials, 600 for the labor. You can save the labor if you do it yourself. You will spend about 3,750 for the African night crawler. You can start with only 1 kilogram of worms if you are willing to wait for them to multiply. When it comes to vermicomposting, the more worms, the faster the production of vermicast. On an ongoing basis, what will it cost to produce vermicast? You will need your materials that the worms will eat and turn it into vermicast. This is composed of composted manure from cow, carabao, goat, and others, and from our organic compost of vegetable scraps and farm waste. For our 1 meter by 5 meter worm bin, we will need around 300 kilograms of manure and 200 kilograms of organic compost. If you will buy the manure, it will cost an estimated of 300 pesos. You can get free vegetable scraps from your local markets, from your kitchen, or from your farm waste. So there is no cost for this. You should be preparing your own compost of vegetable scraps and farm waste well ahead of time. You may need transportation to your farm for the materials. You will need about 8 sacks for the harvested vermicast. All in all, our materials cost is about 880 pesos. If you will do your own bed preparation and harvesting, you may not need to pay for labor. You will take about half a day to prepare the worm bed and about 1 day to harvest. So the estimated cost of your labor is 750 pesos. It will take 2 to 3 months to fully harvest your bed. You can do partial harvesting if there is a buildup of vermicast in your worm bed. To summarize, the total production cost will be 1,630 pesos. For the return of investment, we can harvest an estimate of 400 kilos vermicast from the 500 kilos materials. Depending on your location, vermicast prices can range from 10 to 20 pesos per kilogram. At 10 pesos per kilogram, you will earn 4,000 pesos. At 15 pesos per kilogram, you will earn 6,000 pesos. And for 20 pesos per kilogram, you will earn 8,000 pesos. Your initial 5 kilograms of worms will double in quantity during the period. If you decide to sell half of your worms, you sell 5 kilograms for 500 pesos per kilogram, or 750 pesos per kilogram, or 1,000 pesos per kilogram, earning 2,500 pesos, 3,750 pesos, or 5,000 pesos depending on your location. Prices of African night crawlers differ widely by location and demand. If we sell the vermicast and ANC at a low price, the gross income is 6,500 pesos. At the average price, the gross income is 9,750 pesos. And at a high price, the gross income is 13,000 pesos. From this, we deduct the production cost to arrive at the net income ranging from 4,870 pesos to 11,370 pesos. and a high return of investment ranging from around 300 to 700%. You can at least triple your investment over a period of 2 to 3 months. So you see why a lot of people are interested in vermicomposting as a business? And some people have set up large vermicomposting operations. After this webinar, perhaps you may be interested in vermicomposting as a business too. Thank you for joining us in this webinar series, and we hope you learned a lot. Please like and follow our FB page to get updates. To learn more about East West Seeds vegetable varieties, please download CropWiki EWS app on Google Play or Apple App Store. You can now order high-quality vegetable seeds online from the comfort of your home. Visit East West Seeds official Lazada store today. Bye for now!